That's a cute little bop, right? So I would like to make sure that I give a shout out to Matthew May, who says that he is atomic on SoundCloud. So, music for you. It's free music. It's copyright free music that you can use in your stuff. Not that I'm like monetizing any of this, obviously. So this is Laura with stuff I find interesting, episode 57, and I have so much stuff. I had a profound lack of self-control with this episode, so it will be even more loquacious than usual, and I'm going to be talking about a lot of fun things. So let me just make sure I got everything all lined up here. I believe I do. Okay, so do you remember when we talked about the dogs with the buttons? There's buttons that you can buy for your dogs. It's a large pad. You'd put it on your floor. And different buttons, you would program them with your own voice for different cues. For example, food. So if the dog hit that button, it would go food. If the dog hit the button again, it'd be food. So it would be food, food, food. Other buttons might be out, or I saw one where it was cuddle, and I thought that was really sweet. Anyhow, this is kind of along the same lines. Let me find where the good stuff is. Oh, sorry about that, guys. So the parrots would ring a bell when they wanted to make a call, and then they would use the screen to select which bird they wanted to talk to. So I'm just going to show you one more example of the bird doing this, and then we'll go on. But mind blowing. Okay, the bird's not being very cooperative in my opinion, but okay. This bird likes Rosie. So the birds made a total of 147 requests. And obviously there were people that wrote down what the birds did, when they did it, all that kinds of things. And yeah, that's cool, right? Birds doing a little FaceTime with each other. I was very excited about that. So this guy on the left, we watched a snippet of him when he was talking about Antarctica on, I don't think it was Joe Rogan, but it was one of those guys. And I just find that what he talks about to be very compelling and very grounded, and he just brings up a lot of different things. So if we look at the comments, he talks about how you can and cannot get to the South Pole, and what's going on there, and sort of the general vibe, I guess. But you would find it very interesting. It's going to be in the links, but I brought it up because we've been talking about Antarctica, so I brought this up. Now, this is a cool thing that I'm just including, but what I do want to say about it, I'll just do the introduction. So this is a rabbit hole about, let me find a picture for you. I know I can find a picture. That is not a picture. That is not a picture. There were, in the desert, in, I believe in Morocco, southern Morocco, there were these patterns, and there were, I think, 20 of them. And there was a circle surrounded by a bunch of smaller circles. And nobody knew who they were. This guy randomly found it, doing probably what I do late at night, just kind of bopping around. And he decided, as an intellectual exercise, to see how long it would take to find out what these things were. And there's a video, which will be in the links, that talks about how they discovered what these circles are, where they came from. But the thing that I find the most interesting about the video, and it's probably not really what they intended, or maybe it is, I don't know, is how you problem solve, the different steps you go through to verify stuff, to find out information in this age of technology, so that you're not just whim-whamming and like, oh, this guy says it's for oil drilling. This person says that there are alien crop circles, but in the desert, so alien sand circles, I guess. It's a cool video. I liked it. It's hard to hold my attention for a long period of time. I'm sure that's probably shocking to all of you, but it held my attention. This is okay. I have two depressing things I'm going to talk about today. This is depressing thing number one. Mexico City, which is home to about 20 or 22 million people, I forget which, is within a few months of running out of water. They've pumped so much water, not by they, I mean the city, not like a person or anything. Pumped out so much water from the underground aquifers, the city is shrinking at a rate of 20 inches per year. So Mexico City, the whole city, is actually sinking because of the water being pumped out. And this is a little blurb that talks about what that's like for the people that lived here. And also, how did that happen, right? I don't know if you guys have seen old maps, like really old maps, like from the 15 and 1600s, but around Mexico, it was all like water, like Mexico City specifically. Lots of water, plenty of water, all the water in the world. But because of the way it was developed, water was treated as though it was the enemy. It needed to be conquered. And now we have this. Why do I bring this up? I think it's just important to understand the world and stuff. You guys know how I feel about that. The Aztecs chose this spot, Mexico City, to build their city of Tenochtitlan. I practice saying these things before I go on camera, and I still mess it up. So 1325, it was a series of lakes. They built on an island, expanding the city outwards, constructing networks of canals and bridges to work with the water. But when the Spanish arrived in the early 16th century, they tore down much of the city, drained the lake bed, filled in the canals, and ripped out the forests. To wrap up, to go back into sort of wrap up what we were talking about last time, this is what I want to talk about right here. This on this map. And you say, okay, Laura, what is this? You talk about so many different things. Which thing is this? I'll show you which thing is this. It's that thing. It's the Eye of Sahara, the Richat structure. And we had talked about it being possibly the place of Atlantis. There are some people that believe that because of its obvious geography and the way Atlantis is described in the texts, that this is Atlantis. And we explored that idea a little bit, right? Not like super in depth. But this is on the edge of the whole sort of structure proper. So it's like all, lava that has oozed up and, dried and whatever. This looks to me like a man-made structure. And we can even see sort of where the water would have flowed if there was water in here. But then we could see where it kind of goes off here into these sort of alluvial fans, and that's where it kind of gets murky and you can't really see much of anything. Not on this map anyhow. But what do you think? Man-made, not man-made? Could go either way, right? Let's zoom out again and see how freaking straight that is. Look at how straight that is. It's very defined. So, my personal opinion, to recap, is that was not Atlantis there, but it was probably at one point a thriving city that took advantage of the water that existed there because at one time the Sahara had a lot more water going on. The whole area. That's what I think. And I think that this is part of a canal system. And I base this on a video that I shared. Well, there was a series of videos. I mean, I always try to back up what I'm talking about with different sources, so I'm not talking out of my ass, even though I probably do sometimes. But I think his name is Stig, David Stig. If you go back to last week, you can find it. But the good news is that we probably actually will explore the Richat structure, and we actually will probably find out if there's anything there to be found other than the very rudimentary artifacts we found apart from the surfboard of the gods. This is why it's going to get explored. Why am I showing you my cell phone? I'm showing you my cell phone and I'm showing you this page because this whole area, we've got fluorite, hematite, bastonite, we've got cyanite, alkaline granite, monzocyanite, phonolite, rhyolite, rhyodicite, trachyte. It goes on and on and on. My point being, there are precious metals out there in that area that can be used to power our cell phones as we try to move away from lithium and go into different types of metals to see what we could do with that. I forget what the problem with lithium is exactly, because I know they just discovered some, like China just discovered some, I think, in Tibet. Well, China owned Tibet, that part. I'm not sure. I'll have to look into that. But that's why we're going to find out about the Richat, is because of capitalism. Last week, I talked about different beverages, and I forgot to mention this article about tea, which in and of itself isn't very remarkable. It's kind of But the thing I do want to bring up is that the poor people had one kind of tea in Japan that they drank. So there was this guy who's traveling around. What was his freaking name? Let me see. It was in the 17th centuries. Engelbert Kempfer, 1651 to 1716. So he was told to go out and to study the architecture, landscapes, flora, fauna, history, customs, and religion of Japan. And there was a book that ended up being written about his travels. But I'm only here to talk about one small part of his book. And that's where he goes into a whole thing about tea. But the part I found interesting is that the emperor, the highest echelons of the early modern Japanese tea drinking hierarchy saw tea produced with exorbitant amounts of care and preparation. So-called imperial tea, drunk only by the emperor and his close family, was taken from the earliest harvest, when tea leaves were at their most young and tender. All of the plants came from the same mountain, which had provided imperial tea for generations. Those harvesting it had to abstain from fish and any other unclean food for 3 weeks prior to the harvest, lest their breath taint the valuable leaves. They had to wear gloves while picking the tea and had to wash twice or thrice a day. And there's more tea trivia. But I found that part, I was like, that's some fancy tea. When I was looking up the fancy tea, I also found this place where they had like the most expensive coffee in the world, where the coffee is sort of like almost like wine. Like the people that are creating these coffee beverages are like, what do you call a wine person? Sommelier or something. Anyway, they use like their nose and they swish it around different cups, and it was fascinating to see someone spend like $500 on a cup of coffee or something ridiculous like that. I think it was actually $170, but that's a lot of money for a cup of coffee. Okay, moving into this week. Let me clear my throat. This is brand new, fresh material, hot off the press, so to speak. Scientists, a few weeks ago, a couple months ago actually, had a 20-minute conversation with a humpback whale named Twain. So there's, you've heard about SETI. SETI are the people that have those big telescopes and they sit and they listen for signals, or I'm sure it's evolved beyond the movie Contact that Jodie Foster's in. I think they probably do more advanced stuff than that, and they would have AI, no doubt, to listen so that they don't have to sit there and listen. But there's a whale SETI group, and they're trying to communicate with whales. And now with AI, they can combine AI with sound, and then when the whale makes sounds, they can analyze it in real time, make a sound back, and then analyze that response, and then the AI keeps learning from each response to the point where there's a rudimentary conversation taking place. Now the conversation is probably like hello, hello, hello. It's not probably super duper complicated on our parts, but for 20 minutes there was a back and forth that was happening, a conversation of sorts. Now whales are crazy smart. If we look at this is called bubble feeding, and this is where bubble net feeding. This is where the whales make nets of bubbles. So there are 6 whales that are working together in concert to create this beautiful but deadly net of bubbles. And then the fish get trapped within this sort of like vortex, and then they just sort of all kind of dive in and have a little snack. Very smart whales. This is the academic article that accompanies talking to the whale, so it's not just like nonsense. Like there is science behind this. There is actual peer-reviewed academics. Sometimes I go to academic places like I think academia.com or something, and that's people who have declared themselves academics. They're not necessarily academics, and their stuff isn't necessarily peer-reviewed. So if you're trying to back up whatever it is you're talking about when it comes to science, or if you need to reference something that happened in history, you want to just double check and see what it is that you're reading and where it is that you're reading. And there are plenty of ways to do that with the internet. I'll get off my soapbox. I just think truth is important, and I think it's important that we all hone our critical thinking skills a little bit more. I guess that's the theme for the day today, because I feel as though we've sort of lost the ability to concentrate. And I'm talking about myself as much as anybody else in the world, if not more so. I've lost the ability to read a book. I've always had millions of unfinished art projects everywhere my whole life. But it's gotten pretty bad. It's gotten to the point where I'm just kind of living with them. I'm not necessarily doing much of anything. So I would invite all of you to come with me in thinking about things more fully and living more creatively. I'm working on it. I'm working on it. I'm doing better than I was a couple weeks ago, that's for sure. Speaking of a couple weeks ago, as you guys know, I'm unemployed and not very happy about that. I have a second interview with a job that I'm very interested in on Tuesday, so wish me luck. In my own mind, there are a couple barriers to this job, but I don't know how things are going to work out. We'll see. It's been an interesting journey being unemployed at this age in my life because, okay, I'm just going to go on a tangent for a minute. So I had my own business in like 2006, 2007. Then I took care of my dad for a while. And then I worked for a nonprofit for about a decade. Then I worked for my last job for not quite a year. I was let go, unfortunately. And now here I am, 50 years old. I have no shame in saying that. I think I look pretty good for my age. And it's a bit of an adjustment because your whole life you're told, okay, work hard, American dream, get the house, have the car, get the good job. And it's like we're always going for this kind of horizon. Like we're always racing towards a horizon. And then you hit a certain age and you're like, wow, like I'm there. Like, this is my life. Like, I'm in it. Like, I'm at the horizon. Like, there's really nowhere to go. Like, I'm not going to invent anything, I don't think. I'm probably not going to be a movie star. Definitely not going to be a rock star. Maybe I could write a book that some people might like. But my life, like everybody else's life, most people's life, like 99.99% of my, it's going to be pretty remarkable. I'll work, retire, pension, Social Security, putter around in community gardens, read to little kids. I don't fucking know. And live in a house with like 10 other people because that's probably the only way that we can survive. But my point being is that at this age, it's kind of a bit of an adjustment. So I have to say to myself, what are my priorities? What is it that I want? And is what I want realistic? And if it is, how do I get there? And when I say, how do I get there? What are the steps to get there? Because I have a habit of looking at a task in its, all of it. I look at the whole thing, and you have to break things down into little tiny pieces. So, thank you for that, Princess Fiona. She helped me out this week. This is a beautiful picture. Look at that. I think this place is probably, I think I read it. It's been knocked down, but it's an abandoned bathhouse in Romania. This is Urbex. Urbex is probably like the number one abandoned exploration photography site on the entire internet. Like this guy is like probably like the top of the top. And you can see why. So this is a Romanian bathhouse that's been abandoned. And you can see immediately that it's very, very, very fancy. Very fancy. Like, look at that ceiling with the individual flower motif in the middle. And then you've got a different, like, a little, like, molding thing with a totally different design. And then you've got another layer. Oh, I see, because it's, like, cantilevered up, kind of. Oh, that's fascinating. This is a fountain. So you would have walked by the fountain. This is the entrance. There was a women's side and there was a men's side. And this is probably the women's side, I would imagine. And there were several bath areas of different temperatures and different types of baths. You had your baths for cleaning yourself, but then you also had the baths for rest and relaxation or easing your sore muscles. Now, one of the things about bathhouses in history is that they have been this fancy, and regular people just like you and me could go and take a bath there. But more and more in this world, it's become that the fancy places are only for the people that have money. Like, there's no way there would be a bathhouse now where everybody's sort of mixed together, rich, poor, whatever. Like, that just would not happen at all. And I'm sure there was some bathhouses that were completely off limits to the poors, but there was a different mindset about bathing. Now, I saved this picture because I thought it was very cool. And it is a crane and a street light. And I saved it. Every time I look at it, I go, oh, I like that picture. It's really cool. And I started thinking, Laura, you're kind of weird. But then I read about this little girl who is obsessed with electricity pylons. See, if I was really prepared, I'd have this stuff all set up. But fly by the seat of my pants. So this little girl is obsessed with electric towers. And that one is her favorite. So She loves drawing pictures. She can't fall asleep without watching YouTube videos about them. And she actually got invited to the National Grid. And she was able to go and visit these huge towers. Like, she would be in the car driving and she would say, oh, tower, whatever. And so she's got her mom and dad got matching pylon tattoos. Here's little Lucy getting all excited to go to the National Grid. This is her favorite. This is the pylon that's on the blanket because she loves it so much. Sophie says, people's reactions to her, meaning her daughter, took me by surprise. The amount of love is insane. My inbox has been flooded with people asking me if they can make me things like personalized electric tower cups, key rings, and bookmarks. That's really quite wonderful. And for €15, you can become a member of the Pylon Appreciation Society. So I felt better about my crane pictures. So apparently there are other people that enjoy this. Speaking of cranes, there is a worry that... So here we have these giant cranes. These giant cranes are responsible for moving the shipping containers. So if we look at, let's say my pen, right? So my pen was made in China, Taiwan, whatever, gets stuck in a shipping container with a bunch of other stuff, comes into the harbor, and then these big cranes, take it up. Well, there's a concern that the cranes, because they're made up of so many different parts from so many different areas of the world, like everything that makes up this crane is not made in America. The whole entire thing, not all of it. It comes from all over the freaking place, right? So there's concern that people could put, by people I mean foreign countries that want to get information, could put spying. They could use AI to put spying equipment within the crane somehow. And they would do that by using AI. So the AI would be smart enough to know that it needs to be evasive when someone goes and tries to check to see if, okay, does this thing have spy equipment in it or whatever. I don't know. Just something interesting to think about. But the reality is we are all being spied on all the time and have been for a very long time. And I walk out my door, there's a camera. In fact, this one day, I was outside waiting for the bus, and this rando comes up to me and gets right in my face and starts talking some kind of nonsense. I tell him to step away. I'm like, you need to step back. And, I look, like what I am, a sweet little secretary, whatever. And he starts to get aggressive with me, like he's going to grab me or something. And so I yell, and when I yell, I can be really loud when I yell, and I know how to be scary if I need to be. So I got really loud and scary, and this guy shuffled off. But I noticed as he was walking down the block, he was harassing all of the women that he was encountering as he was heading down the block. And I'm thinking to myself, well, a woman who's not as confident as me and is not able to handle herself, or someone like me on You Catch Me at the Bad Day, or just because of luck or whatever, I need to call the police about this. So I call the police. And they're like, oh, yeah, we know where you are. We're looking at you right now. And I'm thinking, I'm looking up while holding my phone. And I'm like, what do you mean you're looking at me right now? And then the cop proceeded to treat me like I was making a big deal out of nothing. Totally gaslit me. I mean, it was bad. Made me feel like I was wasting their time, which I was not. I would never waste the police's time. They have way too much going on in this world right now for me to waste their time. And was basically like, oh yeah, that's Edgar. That's just the way he is. Oh, he's a danger to the community. That's just the way he is. Anyhow, these are Norias, the Norios of Hama. Noria is, I don't know what language that is. Syrian? Do people in Syria speak the Syrian language? I mean, is that what it's called? Anyway, Noria means groaner, and I'm going to show you why it means groaner. But there are 17 of these massive water wheels, which have got to be, I'm terrible at guessing height, 30, 40 feet? That's really high. Little kids play on it. Here's a video of. So Noria means groan, and that's where this comes from, because it makes that crazy noise. So the way that this thing works, there's little, you can see there's like parts where water could go in. As it turns, it holds the water, and then when it gets to the top, the water just kind of falls out and goes into an aqueduct, which then you can see it as it goes. You could see snaking in the background there that there's an aqueduct that goes, some distance off. So the wheel carries the water up, sort of drops it in without any fanciness. It's just basic sort of physics. And then gravity does the rest. Kind of cool, right? 10 drawings that change architecture. I saw this headline, and I said, I got to check that out. See who's changed architecture, because I really like architecture. So this is Piranesi, etching from the series The Imaginary Prisons. And Piranesi painted speculative architecture. There is a phrase for it, and it has escaped me, but it's when you draw things that are not real. So he's drawing architecture that doesn't actually exist, perhaps maybe can't even exist. And there's power in it, right? Like when we look at this, we feel a certain kind of way. We imagine ourselves running up and down the stairs. We could see there's like catwalks that go off seemingly into nowhere in all directions. It just forces the mind to sort of, your mind becomes expanded, in my opinion, when you look at drawings like this. So I would say absolutely yes. Piranesi did change architecture. He was just bold in a way that others were not, because it was propriety, right? You simply didn't draw things that didn't exist. Like there was a way you had to do things, unless it was like creatures, like there was a lot of anyway. Who else we got? We have Etienne Louis Boulet, who we've talked about before. This is an imaginary structure which was never built. But if it was real, think about what that would be like, walking up to that huge circle thing. It's like Epcot Center on steroids, with trees along 3 rings and a arched entrance that's massive. Very cool. This is Etienne Boulet also, and I don't remember what that represents. This is Antonio Sant'Ella La Città Nuovo, 1914. I have no idea who that is. I don't feel like... I'm sure there's a reason why it changed architecture, or why this is important. I don't know what that is. I'm not an architect. Okay, I'm starting to fall out and get bored and wondering what the point is. This is painting by Zaha Hadid, the Peak Leisure Club. So this is where I kind of tuned out. But I started thinking about Hadid, and my brain said, I wonder if she's related to Bella and Gigi Hadid, who are both models. Are they actresses too? I don't know. But this is Zaha Hadid. She is a Iraqi architect, artist, and designer, recognized as a major figure in architecture in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. So she was born in 1950. She traveled and learned internationally. She taught, but some of her buildings are very interesting to look at. And that was the part that I just wanted to share with you guys. Her stuff has very sleek lines to it, very wide open, airy, heavy but light at the same time. Like this one specifically, there's this random concrete piece that's supported by these black beams, which there are three that are sort of asymmetrical and not the same as the other 7 or 8, however many are there. And it gives the illusion that this concrete piece is going to fly away, in my opinion. This will be in the links so you can look at more of her stuff, because she did a lot of stuff. I was very impressed by her output. It was very, very, very prolific. But speaking of architecture, I found a house that I think I can afford, or the type of house I can afford. And this is a moat house. It has a living room. As far as I can tell, that's it. So there you go. There's the house that I can afford, the moat house. But I was looking at these other houses. Moat house, there's another moat house. Here's another moat house. So a moat house is a house that would sit around the moat. I would imagine there would probably be some sort of security in there, and they would keep watch, make sure nothing's coming through. But it got me thinking about some of these houses that were attached to late medieval, these big sprawling properties where there was a lord of the manor, and then there were the people that kind of lived around. And you would have houses like the falconer's house. So the falconer would have his own house. And this is what the falconer's house has been remodeled into, which made me angry. Because look at this. It's too modern. They went too far with it. It's too modern. I hate it. I mean, I wouldn't turn it down if someone offered it to me. But I hate it. So then I started thinking, okay, well, what would a falconer's residence look like? In reality, not like everything, white and faded out. This is the falconer's house, Prague Castle, 17th century falconer. So this is the main room. Falconer's little head. Not a helmet. I'm sure there's a name for that. But a fascinating little glimpse into a world, right? Now, speaking of houses, this is a house I definitely could not afford. This is a house in Texas, and it's considered mid-century-ish. And I found it to be a really cool looking kind of house. I'm a big fan of rocks. So if there's like a big rock wall, it makes me kind of happy. I like the use of natural materials. I do not. Oh, is that a table? I don't know what's going on with that. Yeah, I guess that's a table with storage. But you can see everything's very swishy. This would have been mid-century. But I like it. I like it. But definitely, as you can see, not a house that I can afford. Okay. Thank you for walking down Architecture Lane with me. Moving on. We are a little more than halfway through. This is the key to the map of geopolitical anomalies. This is something for you to look at kind of on your own time, but it reminds us that, so you see a map, right? You're on the internet, you see a map, and our mind instantly, that's the map, that's what things look like. But a map is there's going to be discrepancies. There's going to be things that are not agreed upon depending on who is looking at the map. For example, Japan might look at the islands off of their coast that border with Russia and say, okay, those islands are ours. And Russia might say, no, those islands are ours, which is actually something that's happening right now. There's an argument over, there's some islands. Something. We have this breaks down those different little things. Bipolar country, city-state, collapsed state, Somalia. Somalia ceased to be a functioning state and coherent country in 1991, yet it continues to be mapped as a sole and sovereign state. The territory controlled by its internationally recognized government continues to fluctuate, but it often encompasses little more than a few neighborhoods of Mogadishu. So it's in permanent transitions. The Kuril Islands. Those are the ones, the southernmost Kuril Islands. Defeated insurgent state, Dutch municipality. You get the picture. I wanted to show you some other maps. Speaking of water, we were talking about water earlier. Nile Basin hydropolitics. This is in regard to the 2010 Cooperative Framework Agreement that may lead to the formation of a Nile Basin Commission. Africa, lots of dry spots. Water comes from the Nile. Nile doesn't necessarily come all the way down due to, much like Mexico City, urbanization, water flows being diverted, water flows being eliminated completely. The blue countries are countries that really want to sign the agreement. They're like, yes, I want to sign the Nile Basin Commission Agreement so that I and my family can continue to have access to water. Now you see they are far away from the Nile because the Nile's up here. These are purple countries that reject the Cooperative Framework Agreement. So the people that live right up on the Nile, by people I mean the governments, are saying, no way. No, the water is ours. We're not going to allow it to be brought down to these other landlocked states in Africa. It's going to be a problem, I think, at some point. I found a very cool thing this week that provided me with lots of fun. This is a radio station finder with a map. Right now we're going to listen to the music we would listen to if we were at the Richat structure. What would that sound like? Or the closest one. There's not a whole lot of radio stations out there. That is not it. Really? Is that it? Huh. It says that's what's playing in Mali right now. Okay. Sure thing. Let's do one more. Let's go to Siberia. Always fascinated with Siberia. Nothing good's going on in Siberia. Let's go to another area of Siberia. Let's go here. I think that's actually Mongolia. Or just outside. Oh, this is Kazakhstan. It's so much fun. Let's see. Okay, one more. Let's see. Let's do... You know what? Let's check out... we've been talking about Antarctica. Let's see what's going on down there. Any radio stations down there? I don't see any. Let's see. What's the closest one? Here's one. This one looks really far away. Look at that. Falkland Islands. Talk radio. There you go. And I've used it successfully listening to music in France without the computer crashing or getting weird. It seems to work very fluid, which is really nice. This is something I've probably brought up before. I think I've talked about this in like episode 4 or 5 or something, but I just love these little guys. These little guys were made in the medieval period in the city of Ani. Ani is a city that used to exist. It doesn't exist anymore. It's an Armenian city that has been decimated by a whole bunch of different things. Politics, economics. There was a horrible earthquake, a couple of them, I believe. But Ani was an incredible empire. So these are like from the 13th century. Hold on a second. Let me clear my throat. It's really irritating, right? Okay. But look at this incredible metalwork, this incredible detail. with the, I'm not sure what you would call that, but absolutely freaking stunning. I can't get enough of these little guys. But moving on, talking about the kingdom, it's the empire that the world forgot. Ruled by a dizzying array of kingdoms and empires over the centuries, the former regional power of Ani is now an eerie, abandoned city of ghosts. There's some history here about Ani and how it started. Originally, it was a cultural hub and regional power under the medieval Bagratid Armenian dynasty. Today, it's an abandoned city of ghosts that stands alone on the plateau in the remote highlands of northeast Turkey, 45 kilometers away from the Turkish border city of Kars. As you walk among the many ruins left to deteriorate for over 90 years, the only sound is the wind howling through a ravine that marks the border between Turkey and Armenia. Here are some more photos. It's also known as the City of 1,000 Churches because it has so many different buildings of worship. Or I should say had. A lot of them are just gone. So there was an earthquake in 1319. Then there was another earthquake a century after that. There's been earthquakes in modern times. Geologically, a very active area. These are caves that people used to live in. There's an underground city. Different than what's the famous city in Turkey? In Cappadocia. I can't remember, but it's a different one. Turkey underneath is honeycombed with all kinds of fun stuff. This is incredible, right? There is fighting going on, like right now. Like it's not a place that you could really kind of go to. Here's some more haunting photos with some commentary. And we could see this is similar to a lot of the other archaeological kind of stuff we look at. We have old construction with new construction over top. These are incredible, amazing buildings. You had to have a lot of money, power, coordination, people, supply. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that comes together to build a city like this. And you can kind of see how great it must have been. And maybe one day it'll be great again, right? Another group of peoples will come in, and then it will be their home for a while. If you find that all very interesting, you're in luck because I have a video that you can watch that talks about the medieval city of Ani. And actually, I'm corrected. It's the city of 1,001 churches. It had about 1,000 inhabitants. So I'm not going to put on the sound. I'm just going to kind of. This is the different empires that have lived here. So the Bagratid, Byzantine, Seljuk, Shaddadids, for a very short period of time. Kingdom of Georgia, Zakharid Armenia, Karakoyunlu, Timurid Akkoyunlu, Iran, Safavid Iran, Ottoman Empire. This list is very generalized. I'm sure that's a very generalized, but this is about 11 minutes. Now we're going to go to Africa. Remember I said we were going to talk about Africa a little bit, and I have some more to say on the subject. We're going to talk about the island of Kilwa Kiswani. This is an island that is here. Now, initially, when I was reading about this place, and they said island, and I looked on the map, I'm like, that's not an island. Like, look, it's like right there. Like, it's not an island. But when you scroll in, it's an island because it's not connected. It's completely free flowing. So why am I bringing this up? Because back in the 1300s, Ibn Battuta, who's sort of Marco Polo type, traveled around, like that other guy, Engelbert, what's his name? He said that this city of Kilwa. He said the city of Kilwa was one of the finest cities that he had ever beheld, and that it was just amazing in its richness and its glory. And he, much like the other guy, wrote a lot of stuff down about how great it was, how beautiful it was. Here's some remnants of the mosque, which we're going to look at. This was quite a statement. So he said it's among the most beautiful of cities and most elegantly built. This is quite a statement considering all the visited cities that he had visited, including Constantinople, Baghdad. Kilwa's Husuni Kuba, or the Great Palace, was built in the 1320s and was then the largest stone building in Africa south of the African Sahara Desert. The enormous palace grounds included a swimming pool and around 100 rooms. It is one of the finest examples of medieval architecture on the Swahili coast. Sadly, although the Great Palace still stands, the general touristic appeal of modern-day Tanzania is mostly constrained to its wildlife and the Kilimanjaro. And there's some stuff that you can read. This is a 19th century engraving. This is incredible to me. This looks almost like a photograph. Now Ibn Battuta, whose name I just Ibn Battuta, yes. His account of Africa in Kilwa was very, he talked about the trees, but it was in a very scientific manner. There were trees and they had, this number of leaves and the animals. But he talked about dog-headed men. There are 3 historical accounts from 3 different explorers, Marco Polo, Ibn Battuta, and Sir John Mandeville, who all had somewhat grounded accounts of their explorations, with flourishes, very dramatic, I'm sure, dramatized slightly. But at one point in their conversation, they all talk about the dog-headed men. This is a thing that you can watch that talks, like, were they real? Was there a different race of men that they called the dog-headed men? Perhaps. Perhaps. This is the mosque. This is made by Gabriel Mura, who did an incredible job. Look at that. So we can spin it, and we can look at the Great Mosque. So this is the Great Mosque that accompanied the palace. And we can scroll in and we can look through all different sides of what this thing looks like. Look at that. I love this. So much fun. That's wild. Now, there is a saying by the poet Rumi that is, before you speak, let your words pass through 3 gates. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? And as I was looking up Kilwa, and somehow I deleted the picture of the palace, which I'll look up here in a second. But I saw this picture, and I have to admit, I got a little bit triggered and felt a little bit mean about it, because, I mean, what is that? So what I have to say is not kind. So we're going to keep it moving, but I just wanted to see if anybody else gets irritated by. And when I say cultural appropriation, I don't mean dressing up as a geisha for Halloween. Some people would probably consider that a cultural appreciation. If you do, feel free to correct me. I do not. However, this, I don't know. It doesn't sit right with me. Maybe I'm being dumb. I can be dumb. But here, I'm going to show you what the palace looked like. This is from Twitter. Here's an example of what it would have looked like. And I saw another example in here somewhere. Here we go. It's from the 14th century. This is an artistic rendering. And then this is what they look like today, the ruins. You can see they're quite eroded. Like a lot. So, some random news. This is from like 1995, but this is the first time I'm seeing it, and I'm finding it interesting, so I'm sharing it with you. So there's a bunch of kids, fourth grade classroom, getting ready to eat their lunch, to get their lunch boxes and head off to the cafeteria, when all of a sudden he saw what lay just inches beyond his little lunchbox was Tut, a lethal banded Egyptian cobra that had been missing since August and believed dead. So this is in eastern Massachusetts, and it disappeared from its owner's backyard. So he yelled, "Snake!" And then the teacher said, leave the classroom, leave the classroom. So they all left the classroom, and the reptile was between a recycling bin and a bookcase. It raised its head and was puffed out its hood and eyes. It was a little bit threatened. They had to call special people to come in and take the snake away, who hopefully was returned to its owner. Let's see. Tut, the lethal banded Egyptian cobra. Let's see if there's any follow-ups. Well, it looks like the owner faced charges, and that's all that I see. So, now remember I said we were going to talk about 2 depressing things? This is depressing thing number 2. So the harsh lives of New York City street kids captured in a flash by Jacob Rees, who was a Dutch photographer. And he captured photos like this. Kids sleeping in the streets. There were a lot of kids. They had homes that were too crowded, so there was like really no place to sleep, so they would just go sleep in the streets, or maybe they didn't even have a home at all. Maybe their parents, war, famine, disease. There was a lot of kids that were running around. And these scenes, although it looks like Jacob might have been like, "Hey, ham it up a little bit for the camera," because this kid's got like a little bit of a smile on his face. This is no doubt probably not far off from the way that they slept every night. Here we have some more pictures of the youths. Here was a little boy working in a Virginia glass factory. He's so little. Well, these cities, right, that had all these little kids running around. It wasn't just New York City. It was everywhere. It said, hey, we got to do something about these kids. Now, in our day, in modern times, if a kid doesn't have parents or the parents aren't suitable, they go into the foster care system, and then they could become adopted. Orphanages, like they were back in the old times, don't really exist anymore. There's children's homes, of course, lots of children's homes. I grew up in a private home, in a foster home, so it was like someone's house, and they took in foster kids, and that's where I lived. But perhaps back in the day, I might have been on the orphan train. Now, this picture is a picture of the kids that have been rounded up in these cities, so people would go around and say, hey, you want a new beginning? You want to go out west? You want new parents? Whatever. They would round up these kids, and they would go out west on what were called orphan trains. And when they reached their destination, adults would line up, farmers who needed laborers, women who maybe couldn't have kids, although that was probably not as common. You would buy a child and take that child home, and that child would become yours. The orphan train movement was the largest mass migration of children in United States history. Between 1854 and 1929, an estimated 150 to 250,000 children were relocated from the overcrowded streets of eastern cities like New York and Boston to smaller cities, towns, and rural communities throughout the Midwest and southern United States. Approximately 5,000 to 6,000 children were sent to Minnesota via the orphan trains, nearly half of whom arrived between 1882 and 1892. By the middle of the 19th century, many cities in the United States had large populations living in poverty. It was estimated that at any given time there were over 10,000 homeless children living in the streets of New York City. In an effort to mitigate this suffering, philanthropists and social reformers introduced the practice of relocating orphaned and abandoned children from densely populated urban centers to quieter towns. This form of placement was discontinued in 1929, and then the foster system, as we know it today, was implementing. And not all of these children were necessarily orphans. Like, the mom might have been like, listen, like I got 10 kids already. You're almost grown. Why don't you, go out west and find your fortune? And the little 11-year-old Tommy would get on the train and go out west. So this breaks down some of the different organizations that were responsible for this endeavor. Let's look at some photos, because that's kind of the best way to get a feeling for things. So this shows the general conditions, and then we have there was an orphanage there were orphanages that were created, but kids didn't necessarily always end up in those. But there were orphanages that had just Native American children. Those ones were notorious. I think we talked about those in a previous episode. Many were lined up at train stations for those interested in adopting or needed laborers, and they were selected like a lottery. Two maps show the distribution of orphan children throughout the states. New York led with more than 33,000, followed by Illinois, Ohio, Iowa, and Missouri. Farms were desperate for laborers, and Midwest states adopted the most orphan children from orphan trains. It was in the paper. Homes wanted. Open your doors. Homeless children. A bunch of books and novels have come out recently acknowledging this part of our history. Interesting, right? Now we're going into conspiracy land. I know you're excited about that. And this week's conspiracy is actually maybe not a conspiracy at all. And that is that the brain has two definite things going on that we know of. It exists. You have a brain. We know that for sure. The brain has electrical impulses that occur in it that cause us to move, speak, react, whatever. That is also true. However, there's a third sort of thing that we feel like we should know about, but we don't know about, and that is consciousness. Where does consciousness come from? How does consciousness operate? Does it exist in the body? Does it not exist in the body? Is it local? Is it translocal? Is it somewhere else? And we're tuned into it like a radio. Yes, maybe we're tuned into it like a radio. ER equals EPR, microtubules as quantum mirrors reflecting the fecundity of consciousness. That's a mouthful, but stick with me here. This theoretical exploration seeks to integrate OR, orchestrated objective reduction, and EPR, Einstein-Rosen and Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen, into a comprehensive framework for understanding consciousness. The proposal posits that entanglement, represented by wormholes between systems, serves as proto-conscious connections in the fabric of the universe. Superconductive microtubules within cellular structures, like your brain, are theorized to be specialized systems capable of reflectively processing these proto-conscious wormhole connections in a manner analogous and connected to the fundamental processes occurring at the event horizon of our universe, a superfluid black hole surface, as per Smolin's fecund universe theory. What does all that mean? Like, that's a lot of stuff, right? I just said a lot of stuff. Here we have pictures of these little microtubules. They actually do exist. I'm not just making it up. These are examples of the microtubules. They oscillate every 1/40th of a second, and they're speculated to be a biological link to the quantum information field via coherent light emission superradiance from the vacuum. Okay, that's a little easier to understand. Let's go to the next one. Does consciousness explain quantum mechanics? A wild theory suggests that consciousness may explain quantum mechanics by forcing the subatomic particles to choose one concrete outcome. Actually, now that I'm reading that, I didn't read this article properly. It's actually not quite talking about the same thing. It's along the same lines, but this is more saying that quantum mechanics, because we are conscious, quantum mechanics exists. So quantum mechanics exists as an extension of our brain. What I was talking about, and let's get rid of this article, is it involves wormhole theory and involves our brain. So wormhole theory is the idea that there are these places in the universe that you can go into and pop out some other place, like billions and billions and billions of miles away that you shouldn't be able to go into. But there's a couple of things going on here. I don't want to lose things, but it goes even deeper. Einstein talks about space and time, wormholes. Let's dial it back just a little. The hippocampus as a wormhole, a gateway to consciousness. It's a well-established notion that conscious experience is a subjective phenomena and not a depiction of objective material reality, and not even a reconstitution of inputs from the senses. What we perceive to be out there is a private creation, not the real world that is out there. Okay, so let me bring it back just a little bit here. Is consciousness a wormhole? I think this is what I looked it up. So there's a growing body of empirical evidence that consciousness is not local, which means it's not here, which means we would tune into it like a radio. It is not confined to specific points in space, such as brains and bodies, or even specific moments of time. To take things one step further, this radio that we have, and then we're tuned into the source, we are all tuned into the same source. Short, tall, black, white, whatever, we're all tuned into the same source, but we have different radios that we're using to tune into that source. And the way that we are able to connect with that source is due to I'm having lighting issues. All right, hold on a second, guys. There's a whole thing that failed over there. We don't need to talk about that right now. We're just going to turn that right around and pretend it doesn't exist. Okay. To take it one step further, so I was talking about the entanglement, and we can tune into this, and that the source, it's been postulated that the source is the black hole at the center of the universe. So that's the source. We all connect to it with our own little individual radios via these microtubules in our brain that vibrate and oscillate and are the mechanism through which we can be conscious and know the universe or something. Right? This is the academics that goes into what I'm talking about. Theory of brain function, quantum mechanics, and superstrings. This also brings in string theory. Really, what I'm talking about, and what we need to sort of focus on here, the main point that I'm making, because I am actually making a main point. Let me go to page 45. I'm not even going to go there. This talks more about the microtubules. But this is, there is definitely connection, right? We've talked about connection. That guy who said that there was a, morphic resonance. I talked about how, when you get home, your dog already knows that you're on your way home, even if you left work early because you were sick. It's like the dog knew you were coming home. And the idea is that we're all connected, and I do believe that. I do believe that. There's probably people out there listening right now where you might have an experience where your sister, loved one, pet, something happened to them, and you felt it. You felt it when it happened, and you knew instantly that something happened, or you knew, and then you were like, no, 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 everything's fine, and then you find out later, come to find out, oh yes, my sister was in an accident, she was hurt badly, she's okay now. But I can tell when my guy is having a bad day. I can feel it. Just this energy that comes off, right? So let's test this just a little bit, and we're gonna test this also with what we talked about with MK Ultra and reading minds and stuff. I'm thinking of an image right now, and I'm sending it through the quantum entanglement field. It's an image of an object. And right now I am thinking incredibly deeply about this object, and I am broadcasting this information to you. And what you're going to do is you're going to grab a piece of paper and you're going to draw whatever you see in your mind. Okay, I'm transmitting. Okay, we'll find out if that worked or not. I'm sure it did, but I mean, it's not. There's stuff to this, but we're not there yet, right? As a species, we're not quite there yet. Okay, this is one of the last things. This is about if you time travel and you end up in medieval Europe, this gives you advice on how to survive so that you don't die horribly. We're going to look at some stuff as I start to close here. More Matthew May. Thank you, Matthew. I like his stuff. This is an artist, and his work is just fascinating, right? Look at all this detail. Do 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 do. When I was a kid, I used to love stuff like this. I would just pour over everything. One of the things my mom used to do to keep me quiet is she would hand me an atlas, and she would pick out names from the back, and she would say, okay, you have to find those places, and she would hand me the atlas, and I would have to look. For Kilwa Island, right? I'd have to figure out where it was and stuff. Yeah, it was cool, but it would keep me busy because I like stuff like this. So this is fun to go through. All kinds of stuff to look at. This is probably one of the fanciest. I can't enlarge it. So as we head into the week, this is wait a minute, what are we looking at here? Hold on. Hold the phone. Central Asia is what we are looking at. Wait. Yeah. I hope everybody has had a lovely weekend. Nice and refreshing. Peaceful. As we go into the week ahead, focus and just move forward. And I say that really for myself more than anybody else out there in the whole wide world, because I am just terrible and have been terrible. You can kind of see the progression. The longer that I'm unemployed, there's like a progression that happens. Like I give up earlier and earlier in the day. It's such a tough process, Do 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 do. So these are ruins. Most of these places probably do not exist anymore. They've probably been knocked down. Well, this probably exists, but some of these mosques and whatnot. They're in war-torn areas. All right. So, we've come to the end. Thank you to everybody who has watched. I appreciate you. And make sure to, put stuff in the comments. Ask me questions. Tell me what you think of the episode. I know it's super long, but do you like it long? Would you prefer it shorter? Would you prefer it broken up? I don't know. Just things to think about.